There is so much content online right now about how to study. If you open TikTok or YouTube and you are immediately hit with methods, routines, schedules and strict rules, everyone seems to have the perfect system to hack your brain and to have the perfect routine and aesthetic. But through all this noise, we rarely stop to ask a much more fundamental question, which is, why do so many people study for hours every single day, sitting at a desk and feeling like nothing actually sticks? So this video is not about studying harder. I'm not going to be giving you another rigid schedule to follow or the perfect routine. I want to talk about why we are the way we are traditionally told to study the way we do, and why copying someone else's method or routine might actually be the very thing that is holding you back. So let's talk about the model that we are taught. When I was studying physiotherapy for 4 years, I was part of a very large group of students. We were all in the same lectures, reading the same books, facing the same exams, and naturally everyone started to study the same way, sitting long hours in the library in complete silence, sitting in the same position for many hours. There was this unspoken rule or this unspoken assumption floating around the room, and a kind of a collective belief that if you just follow the same method as everyone else, you would eventually get the same results as the best performing students. This assumption sounds maybe okay on paper, but if a method works for someone, there's high chances that it might not work for you, because each person is different and we are very different in our way of learning, in the way we think, in the way we retain information. So that logic is deeply flawed, because if you ignore the most important variable in the equation, which is you, how are you going to achieve the results that you actually want? Assuming that learning works the exact same way for everybody and for every single brain is simply just not realistic, it's not true. Everyone has a different learning pattern. The neurons fire in a different way for everybody. So you need to first understand yourself and how you retain information. For example, I remember trying so hard to copy what seemed to work for others. I would sit in the library for 8 hours straight, trying to force my brain to absorb information the way my classmates seems to be doing, and I was just so frustrated because I would feel like I was putting so much effort and getting mild results. I thought that I was just not good at studying, which is completely the opposite actually. I understood after 5 years doing a bachelor and the master's degree in a field that I actually like, that I am very good at studying and learning and comprehending. Looking back, I realized that the problem wasn't me, it was that I was using a method that wasn't designed for how my brain works. I was trying to fit a square into a triangle and beating myself up because I didn't get the results that everybody was getting. You know, sitting still in the library for 8 hours just made me completely exhausted, and I felt like I retained maybe 20 to 30% of what I was supposed to. The sad thing in student culture is that we often mistake exhaustion as a proof of like productivity or high achievements. You might think that if you are suffering, if you're tired, that must probably mean that you are working hard and that you're going to get good results. That is not necessarily the truth. I'm a very convinced adept of working smarter rather than working harder, and being tired doesn't mean you are learning, more like the opposite. The more you sleep, the more rested you are, the more you're going to retain information and be more productive. So this brings me to one of the biggest myths in studying, is that the idea of that more hours of studying or learning or, you know, writing automatically means better results, especially in a study with me niche where you can easily see 12-hour sessions, 14-hour sessions. Sometimes I just wonder how they do it and what do they do for so long, actually. We are kind of obsessed with the quantity of time we track, the hours we brag about our all-nighters, we wear our fatigue, it's a badge of honor. In reality, learning does not scale linearly with time. You cannot just double your hours and expect to double your knowledge. That is just not happening. At some point, your brain just hits a wall because you have given it so much information, you just cannot take more of it. So after a certain number of hours, every additional minute you spend studying yields less and less return. So more hours just means more fatigue, less retention, more frustration. And unfortunately, I learned this the hard way because nobody actually taught me how to study, how to learn, how to get into uni and be efficient and to preserve my health. So I spent years grinding myself into the ground only to realize that efficiency matters so much more than duration. For me, like, studying is less, but in a way that actually made sense for my brain. It changed everything. It gave me my life back, and ironically, the less I worked, the better grades I got. So my next point is that learning is not consuming information. Another thing that didn't work for me was studying from someone else's notes. I used to borrow notes from friends who seemed to have it all together and to have good grades. Their notes were very complete, beautiful, color-coded, and reading those notes that I didn't write did nothing for me. I couldn't retain any information from it, and it was because that way I didn't have the opportunity to appropriate the information that was given to me, because I am facing material that is all clean and ready to study, but there's nothing to write about or to interpret or to understand because everything is ready for me to study. So when you read someone else's note, you are consuming their understanding of things and their understanding of the topic, and sometimes that's how you miss out on key information that maybe the teacher gave and you could have interpreted in a way that would have made you retain the information. So when you read someone else's notes, you are seeing the end result of their thinking process, but you are skipping the work that actually builds the neural pathways in your own brain. For me personally, learning happens when I reorganize, when I rewrite, when I connect the ideas in my very own way. The process of struggle of taking raw information and turning it into something that makes sense to me represents at least half of the learning, if not 70%. For example, I'm an art student, and when I make my history of arts and when they're all done, I feel like I'm almost done with studying. I remember a specific moment that changed everything for me. It was right before a major exam. I was short on time, I was incredibly stressed, and I felt like I couldn't possibly memorize 30 pages of complex material in just one evening. So I did something very desperate. I stopped sitting and I started walking outside of my apartment, and I started like studying out loud. I'm speaking right now, and I paced back and forth, reciting the information and hearing my own voice explain the concepts, and something clicked, and I retained those 30 pages in just 1 hour. And I was shocked that I retained so much information by just walking around my block while I was like super stressed. That was crazy to me at the time. And that moment revealed something important about myself. I have a very strong auditory memory, and I need movement to think. And sitting still at a desk was actually blocking my ability to learn. And once I understood that about myself, studying stopped being about force and started being about being more aligned with my needs and my personal way of learning. So I think this brings up a bigger issue in the school system in general, and why school doesn't teach this, doesn't teach how to study, how to learn. This brings up a very bigger issue to me. We are not taught how learning actually works, especially in scientific or competitive fields. Good students are, and their methods like become the norm, and their success make it seem like everyone can do it, but not everybody can do it like them, because they have probably certain privileges, abilities that not everybody has. And this is not to complain about one's situation, but to just be clear about the fact that not everybody starts on the same line. And that brings the idea of identity in meaning into studying. I eventually realized that studying something misaligned with who you are makes learning extremely complex and exponentially harder for you. So, for example, if you are in a major that doesn't suit you because you took this major to please your family, and I'm not blaming here, I'm just pointing an observation. If you are studying something because it is the safe path or for whatever reason, but this major or this topic doesn't resonate with you completely, it will be harder for you to succeed in that major or topic. I'm not saying that everything you will encounter in class will be aligned with who you are, but it has to be a tendency where the most of classes are interesting to you. So that's where neurodiversity enters this conversation, and different study methods that exist also. I feel like many standard study methods fail many neurodivergent people because the classic methods ignore cognitive diversity, and this is not something new. This is something that can apply itself to many things in life, not just the studying field. For example, for me, studying on paper matters immensely. If I am not studying on something physical or tangible, I will not retain any information. Studying on a screen is just not possible for me. I can learn, I can write, I can do assignments, but like purely studying, I cannot do it on a screen. It's just not possible. Because the reason is because the screen makes the learning feel abstract and slippery, makes the information feel more concrete, and this is going to bring more work up front, but knowing this information, I can organize myself to do what I have to do in time. So there is also a way to keep trace of my own thinking process and everything that I have done, and I think it's a good thing to have some kind of archives of whatever studies you made. Just good to have, you know, your old study archives. So, before you ask yourself, how should I study? Because this is the point of the video, is I think you should flip the question and ask yourself, how do I learn? How do I learn is more important to you than to know how to study. Because knowing how to learn, meaning knowing your dominant intelligences and learning styles, can help you be a top student. So school coaching is something that can be very helpful. It's not necessarily accessible to everybody. It can be expensive, but you can take free online assessments based on Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, and that can give you a great starting point. And I want to say that these tests don't define you, and the point is certainly not to put you in a box. The point is to give you a direction and to help you understand how you naturally process information. Do you learn logically by breaking things down step by step? Do you learn physically by moving or by doing something? Do you learn socially by discussing with others, or maybe visually by seeing like diagrams, images, drawings? Or maybe you learn verbally by speaking the information, or maybe you learn by hearing like I do. Once you start to observe yourself consciously, you stop trying to force yourself into a mold that doesn't fit you. You stop feeling guilty for not being able to sit still for 6 hours. If your brain just learned better by moving, you can stay at your desk for 1 hour, but then you need a 30 minutes break, and it's okay to not follow the Pomodoro method. Like, I know I use it myself, but I think it's important to have like some kind of nuance to it. I think I will probably link a few reliable resources in the description box if you want to explore this, but please do not use them to copy another study method. Or the goal is really to help you understand yourself. So to finish this conversation, the idea is to really stop fighting your brain. The goal of this channel, Sophiastudies, and specifically this series called Study Red Thread, is not to give you a rigid set of rules to follow. It is to invite you to slow down and to observe yourself, to observe like your own process, to stop fighting against your own nature and start working with it, adjusting to yourself, adjusting to your needs, paying attention to your own specific habits. We are going to be exploring this together over the next few episodes, and we will talk about how to build a steady environment that supports your specific needs, how to manage your energy instead of your just like managing your time, and how to create like a learning process that feels sustainable and enjoyable. Because I feel like if you're studying and it feels like a punishment, there is something that needs to be questioned and adjusted. It shouldn't be something you dread every single day. It should be something that brings you some kind of joy. Because if you don't enjoy studying, why? I know that the old generation, I say old because to me is the generation before me that really pushed this narrative of like studying means stable career, but it's not accurate anymore, I feel like. So for this week I invite you to try something different. If instead of like trying to study more, try to study in a different way. Pay attention to when you feel the most focused and when you feel the most distracted. Notice what kind of information sticks easily and what feels like a struggle. Start like collecting data on your own brain, and this is it. Thank you for watching the first episode of this series. I am so excited to go on this journey. This has really been a goal of mine, to focus more on understanding thyself, and to share that with others. I feel like it's very fulfilling and helpful. So if you have any thoughts, or if you have discovered something new about yourself or your own learning style, please let me know. I read everything and I see everything. And on that note, let's stop studying hard and let's start studying smart. I'll see you in the next video, in the next episode. Bye!